Hello and welcome to episode 2 of More Than Just an Itch, your essential guide to living with and understanding eczema. Over 8 million people in the UK have eczema. That's 1 in 10 adults and 1 in 5 children. The condition in some of those children will improve over time, but as we heard in episode 1, there's no guarantee it won't return. And for many people, it never goes away. Today, we'll be meeting 2 people for whom eczema is a constant presence in their adult lives. We're asking, how does it affect them? How does it make them feel? How do they cope with it? How has it impacted on their lives? We'll be finding out in just a moment. A reminder that this National Eczema Society podcast series was funded by AbbVie, Almirall and Lilly, and they had no editorial input or control over the content or other outputs. So let's meet our guests. Jack Ransom is 29. You've just had your birthday, so happy birthday.
Thank
and
you.
Chloe North is 21 and has recently graduated with a psychology degree, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you as well for being with us here today for the podcast. We're calling this episode A Patient's Journey. So let's start with just a little overview, if you don't mind, of your current situation with eczema, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, it's pretty good. It's the best it's been for a number of years, probably, which is, very nice position to be in, not having to use too many treatments, just using moisturising cream and steroid cream occasionally if I have a flare-up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I haven't got too many complaints at the moment, I have to say.
Yeah, mine's really similar. So I'm just on, obviously, emollients every day, which help. And then if I desperately need it, I use steroids for flare-ups, but it's quite rare at the moment, which is good.
Yeah, and I know that it's a very, very different situation from how things have been for both of you in the past. So let's go into that. We'll start at the beginning of your eczema journey. Your very first memory of eczema, Chloe.
So for me, I remember I always had it quite mildly when I was a child, in like the classic sort of way. So on elbows and behind the knees and stuff like that. And then it was when I hit 14, it got like significantly worse. And I got like random different rashes. So I had one on my neck, which was like, they thought it was ringworm at the time. And then, so I got treated for that and it didn't work. And then they worked out that it was,
That's a bit dicey.
They worked out that it was eczema, so they gave me like a antibacterial treatment.
Yeah, I'm very similar, actually. I mean, I was diagnosed with eczema at 3 months old, so
you don't even remember not having it, actually?
No,
yeah,
precisely. Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm aware, it's been with me basically my entire life. My earliest memories actually are probably my parents taking me to different treatments, different sort of treatment centres, so different dermatologists, and we tried a few things like Chinese herbs, but then primary school was where it was, I guess, became a little bit more obvious to myself, and then particularly secondary school was where it really sort of blew up, I guess, when I hit puberty. So that was when it became the most difficult to manage.
Yeah, that was similar for me. It hit when it was like puberty, and then it's the like combination of that and puberty together is like was hell.
Yeah, it's not fun.
It was not fun.
No, I mean, it's such a self-conscious time anyway, like for anybody at all. I mean, you know, people get spots and greasy hair and your body's growing in a weird way. And then you've got eczema as well. I mean, how did you deal with that with the other kids at school? Kids can point things out so much, can't they?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was the time that I probably had the most social anxiety. So you're obviously going from a relatively known environment at primary school where it's a smaller group of people.
Yeah.
You know, you already know everybody, you're kind of settled with them. And then you go to a much bigger school, new group of people. You're trying to, not only are you sort of working out how you want to be presented to them, but you're also at an age where people don't have necessarily as big a filter.
Right. That sounds like a kind way to put it.
Definitely some name calling was done.
I did get like questions about like why it was looking like that and what was wrong.
And did you know what to answer?
No,
actually?
At the time you're like, I don't know what to say because I don't know myself, and it's like a question to me, and like.
Yeah, well, it's like, how am I meant to answer that? Because it's all you've ever known.
Yeah.
And you're like, and also nobody. The thing is that, particularly then, nobody really knew what caused it. And so you're kind of just like, I don't know, I've just got this thing where I itch all the time. I remember a kid at school being like, oh, that sounds great. I love being itchy. And I was like, no, it's not fun at all.
I've never heard that.
Yeah.
I guess he was trying to be sweet and
Yeah.
find common ground, maybe.
Yeah, it was an interesting take on it. But I guess if you've not ever experienced like an eczema style itch, and you think of people who have like a back massage saying they're like, I've got a bit of an itch, and you're like, oh, that feels nice, then that might be from their perspective something that doesn't sound too bad. But obviously what you experience when you've got a flare up, or even actually when you haven't got a flare up, is very intense.
Yeah.
But there is like the sort of thing that makes it even weirder is there is that satisfaction when you are scratching.
It's the
So
worst
there
bit.
is actually, it does feel good, which
Yeah.
makes it even worse.
Yeah, because then you can cut your skin.
Yeah. But
It's like the only relief, even though it makes it worse. And like I always used to, you'd have like a point where you're itchy and you'd scratch that and you'd be like, okay, that's getting rid of the itch, but then it would spread to other parts, so that you kind of just find yourself moving around your body trying to chase the
definitely.
scratch. Yeah, very frustrating.
And eczema can be so distracting as well. I've never had it as badly as either of you, but even my small amounts of eczema that I've had, it gets to be the point sometimes it's all you can think about. And I mean, when you're trying to do your school studies as well and get your GCSEs and everything, I mean, how much did that come into it for you?
For me, it had a big impact, but particularly when you're coming up to exam season. So I always found, I don't know about you, but stress had a big impact on how my skin was behaving. So obviously the two go in sort of a poor hand in hand. You'd be really stressed leading up to exams, so you have a flare up, and it really impacted my sleep, which meant that you're more tired, you're more stressed, and so your skin gets worse. And
It's a vicious circle.
Yeah, it was horrible.
yeah, I remember because like when it was at its worst, my sleep was like, oh, I couldn't sleep at all. I was up in the middle of the night. I used to just go and sit in my garden because it was obviously the coolest place.
Try and cool down.
Yeah, and I would sit in the darkness in the garden to try and stop myself scratching. And so I was like living on a couple of hours sleep a night, and then you're sitting in a classroom trying to focus on what a teacher is telling you, whilst you're also focusing on the fact that like your skin is on fire and you want to scratch it underneath your shirt and your blazer, all made out of polyester and it's all sweaty in a hot classroom in the middle of summer. And I was just, it was so hard sometimes when you're there.
And also for me, we had to wear white shirts,
Yeah.
and I used to scratch and then you bleed.
Yes. Yeah.
So it made you really self-conscious about if it was hot and you didn't have a jumper over the top.
Yeah.
You're like, I have to like be careful. I don't want people to see that I've got like blood on my white shirt. But I think we tried about 3-4 different brands of shirt manufacturers to try and find one that didn't use polyester.
Yeah.
So were your schools helpful about that? Were they understanding?
Not particularly, no.
Really? That's quite surprising.
I was alright because the actual white shirts you could buy from anywhere, but we had summer polo shirts and you had to buy them with the branded logo, obviously. And they did used to make me sweat so much, but I couldn't really do much about it. So in summer I could either wear that, which would also a lot of the time I didn't want to because it would my arms would be out and they would be covered in scars and stuff. So I wouldn't want it, or it's easy access that you don't want.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, it's true.
A lot of the time you want to cover
Subconsciously
yourself up to stop yourself from accessing it.
And it works.
It does work.
To some degree.
Yeah.
But then you are sort of just scratching through the material.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that kind of illustrates part of what is coming out of this podcast is that people's experience of eczema and also like how it's treated and helped or not helped seems to be so different, so individual. It depends on your school, and it also depends on your doctors as well. So let's talk a little bit about your actual treatment sort of journey. Jack, if I come to you first, you say that you've been on lots of different things. Kind of, if you go back to those adolescent years, what treatments were you trying at that point?
So I think in the early years, and to be honest, I'm not up to date with what most of the social media stuff is these days, but there was a lot of, and I think there still is a lot of like different types of weird and wonderful ways that you can treat skin eczema outside of, say, just going to the doctors. So we initially tried, the NHS route, and so predominantly using steroid creams and moisturizer. We then
Was your first protocol just GP?
Correct, yeah. So that was the first protocol. We then heard about Chinese herbs, and it seemed to work. I then stopped using that for it was like monstrously expensive, so it wasn't really feasible over the long term. And then so I went back to just using steroid creams and moisturizer until I had a fortuitous meeting with a research nurse when I was in my early 20s. And
what happened there?
Well, I was serving her coffee when I was working behind a bar at a hotel, and got chatting with her about eczema and how living in Oxfordshire in the valley seemed to affect it more due to pollution than perhaps when I went to the seaside or somewhere that was a little bit more open. They then asked if I wanted to take part in a trial. And I was on that for about 3.5 years. I was using it with a JAK inhibitor. It was good. I mean, it had a lot of benefits. It got rid of most of the symptoms. It got rid of the itch. It made everything a lot more manageable. There were some side effects due to it being a mild immune suppressant.
Right.
So I took the decision about 3.5 years in to come off the trial, and since then I've gone back to just using the standard stuff.
Yeah, really just sort of reaching out for all sorts of different things. Was it similar for you, Chloe? You sort of started at the GP, but then maybe looked around.
Yeah, started at the GP route, and I think I found a list the other day, and there was over 20 different steroids on it. So I think I've tried possibly every steroid under the sun.
Yeah.
And obviously loads of different emollients and stuff like that. Then obviously got onto the hospital route, and it was all of those. I was on antibiotics at one point. That did work, but not for long.
When you can't stay on them for a super long time either.
Can't. I got put on an immunosuppressant drug, which did work. I was never eczema free, but it worked, and I could function properly day to day, which I couldn't before. But
that's quite shocking that you say you couldn't function properly day to day. What do you mean by that?
Well, in the sort of way that I wasn't sleeping.
Right.
I couldn't easily go and do social activities as much as I can now, I guess. But yeah, I didn't think about it as much at the time, but it did affect me in so many ways. But unfortunately, you couldn't stay on that drug for more than 2 years, so I had to come off it.
It sounds like your parents were really sort of just searching around. Is that because, GPs, obviously, they have to treat all the illnesses of everyone of every age, don't they? So, they were maybe giving you fairly limited advice.
Yeah. I felt like the GPs, they can only do so much, can't they? And I felt like once when I went there, the GP was so nice, but she was just so sympathetic. She was like, I'm so sorry, but I just can't help you. I don't have enough expertise in this department.
Yeah, I mean, I found the GP experience to be honest mostly positive. They were always going out of their way to try and help. I did have, you were saying that you got misdiagnosed. I had one case where I went in, my skin was particularly bad, and I really needed some antibiotics. It had become infected. So I'd gone in, and my usual GP wasn't there, so I had somebody else, and they misdiagnosed me with scabies.
Oh gosh!
And so I was sat there, and they were saying that you got. And at this point, I was probably 19, so I'd had eczema, 19 years. I was fairly certain I knew what it was.
Yeah.
They're like, no, you've definitely got scabies, and I was sat there going, I'm almost nigh on as sure as you can be.
But at the same time, you're sort of thinking, but I'm not a doctor. Maybe there's something.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Hard to know where to turn, I suppose.
Yeah, cause I thought, well, I'll give it a go. But the most frustrating thing with that was obviously you have to wait 2 weeks or so to get an appointment. I then was given obviously the wrong medication, and I had to wait to go back in. So that was the only time I was really frustrated with it. Other than that, I have to say that they did their best to try and help, but usually they went to their first line of defense, which is steroid cream.
Yeah,
right.
I felt when I was I was going to the hospital a lot for it. Obviously, at that time I was 14, 15. My mum was it was basically my mom was dealing with it more than me because I was a teenager. So she was coming to all the appointments with me. And I remember one, and my mom just broke down because she was just like, I was really bad. My skin was like what the worst it could be, I think. This doctor had just told us like to try this steroid, which we'd already tried like a year ago or something and hadn't had no effect. And she just started like crying, and she was just like, I'm sorry, but like you need to help us more, because I couldn't function really. And my parents were like, that was all they were thinking about as well, because my skin was just the only thing we even talked about in the house, really.
Really?
And it was like, there were a few nurses that are like the best people I've ever met, and they helped me so much. But it was the sort of thing, you go in every time and you see a different doctor and you have to explain it, when like all you want to do is just find something that works.
I can even hear in your voice actually that sort of exhaustion.
Yeah.
That you've saying your parents. I mean, your mum breaking down in tears at the doctors. That's not a stereotypically British thing to do,
No,
is it?
it's really not.
Trying to
No,
keep a
she'll
good
probably
face and
hate me for saying this.
No, but I mean, it sort of shows the extent to
Yeah.
which it was impacting, like you said, on your whole family.
Yeah, it is.
I think what the impact, actually looking back, was probably more severe on my parents than on me, because for you it's all you've known. So you're kind of like, this is my lot, this is what I've got. But it was like my mum was constantly trying to find different makes of like bedding manufacturers, the stuff that was the kindest to your skin, had to use different washing up detergent, hoovering all the time to try and get rid of dust. I found out I was allergic to cats, and we'd always had cats. So then it was like trying to, he wasn't allowed in my bedroom, and like hoovering anywhere he'd been so I could sit down. And so it's like all this additional pressure that looking back, I think at the time I didn't think anything of it. And then looking back, you realize that they really went out of their way to try and make your life as comfortable as possible. Yeah,
it sounds quite all encompassing for your everyday life. And I mean, it's clearly impacted on your mental health and that of your parents as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, the mental health side of it is, in my opinion, the worst aspect of eczema. Because I can't think of anything else that makes you feel more sort of uncomfortable in your own skin.
Physically and metaphorically.
Yeah, because you're really uncomfortable because you just are uncomfortable, you're itchy. Yeah. But also the way that you view yourself when you're having a really bad flare-up can be really detrimental to how you perceive. I mean, as we were discussing earlier, even though I think it's almost certain that most people don't view you in the same way that you are looking at it, you're still looking at yourself being like, I look horrible. Yeah. And yeah, it's not a very nice feeling.
Yeah, on the mental health side, I think I've never had like depression or anything around it, which I know people have, but I think I have like a really weird view of myself, like almost like a dysmorphia around how I actually see myself, because sometimes like someone will send me a picture of myself and I almost don't recognize my face, because I'm like, I don't realize I actually look like that. Or sometimes I think my skin's way worse than it actually is. And then like the next day I see the pictures and I'm like, that's me. Like, oh my God. Or it's actually way worse than I thought it was. And it's really weird. I don't feel like I necessarily know how I look all the time.
I've never felt that it had that much of an impact, enough of an impact for me to need to go and seek professional help. But I think that, I've been speaking for myself, I've been fairly lucky. I'm fairly self-confident. So I always managed to have elements of my life that kind of made up for it, and I didn't feel like it put me down enough. But that's not the case for everybody. And when it's at its worst, it is really bad. I had to miss work a few times when I was working at a hotel, just because my skin was so bad. I was operating on like 2 hours sleep, and that built up over a week, and I was like, I just can't function. But when you say that to like a manager, they're kind of like, what are you talking about? Having itchy skin is not a reason to not go to work. But and I see it from their perspective. I do understand why that sounds like you're just trying to pull the wool over their eyes. I think the lack of sleep, again, is one of the things that makes everybody feels worse when they've not slept properly.
Absolutely.
And you usually feel a bit more depressed and like a bit more, annoyed at stuff. And so like that, when that builds up, plus you're viewing yourself as looking a little bit less attractive, it can all sort of just ball into one to the point where you've had enough.
I think that thing of like trying to explain it to people and people being like, no, of course you don't need to miss work because of that. I think it's because it's actually such a common illness.
Yeah.
Like so many kids have it. Like you say, oh, I've got eczema, and then everyone's always like, oh yeah, I had that when I was a kid, or oh yeah, my sister has that. So people always view it as, yeah, it's just a little rash. It's
Bit
not
trivial.
Yeah.
I mean, did you ever maybe buy into that in any sense of sort of like, oh, yeah, maybe I am a bit weak, and sort of self-doubt? And
it's the only element of my life that I would actively try and change. If I could, change anything about myself, it'd be getting rid of eczema. Having said that, I think that there is also a lot worse things that you could have. And so, just trying to keep a positive perspective on it. But yeah.
But sometimes you can't be positive. And,
No.
Yeah.
No.
That's kind of a...
Yeah.
Yeah, that's on a good day.
Yeah.
And if I could just say as well, I mean, there are statistics about this, and this is specifically to you, Jack, about how men, especially young men, do tend not to reach out and talk about their mental health problems as much. There's societal sort of expectations, which are measured by various surveys and research, and that's an additional pressure that you would have been under.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, I think the mental health, particularly for young men, is something that I'm quite passionate about. So I think that, this on top of all the other factors that can go into playing on people's mental health is something that should be looked at. I mean, I wasn't trying to downplay it. I just think that it's important to also, for me anyway, I always try to look at keeping myself grounded and not, but it's easier said than done. I mean, I'm saying that right now because my skin's good. When it's really, really bad, then I've had moments where I've been like, I just want to tear my own skin off.
Wow.
Yeah, definitely. It's also one of those things of, because it's a weird illness where sometimes it's really bad, sometimes it's really quite good, that when you're thinking about it in a mental health perspective, it's quite hard, because when it's at its best, you don't think, oh, I need to go and talk to someone about this.
Yeah.
But then when it's at its worst, you probably think, yeah, I should. But you're so focused on trying to get it better and manage it that really you don't have the time to be thinking about.
Or perhaps even sort of the strength.
Yeah.
Their mental capacity.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really incredible. You both sound so resilient, actually. I mean, if anything, I hope, people listening to this can hear your resilience, and you're very philosophical about it as well. You've mentioned about some of the treatments and things, but also, you both mentioned a little bit about diet and stuff. Your cat allergy. So have you found out about triggers? Is that things that you've come across on your own, or did medical professionals say, oh, you should look for triggers? How did your trigger journey come about?
So this was years and years ago, I went to a dermatologist, and we had I don't think I did a full allergy test. I can't really remember, to be honest, but I know that they kind of came back and just said, I'm not really allergic to anything massively. I still,
so I cut out that. Well, I only cut out milk. I didn't cut out like cheese or chocolate.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. so I drink oat milk now, but I personally don't think it has that much of a difference. Uh-huh. I've only really done it because really I don't like milk that much. So it's quite easy for me to do that. I had allergy testing. I'm not sure if it was the same as you, but I had patch testing. So it was on my back, a massive piece of plastic basically on my back. And they had loads of little dots, and they tested all the different allergies. And you had to keep it on there for 3 days, I think. Wow. And so yeah, it was really difficult to shower and stuff like that, and it was really irritating. Yeah, and then you came back, and there were just loads of little spots all in the back on my back. But so it came back saying I was highly allergic to cats and dogs. Okay. So we had a dog at the time, and we had to give her away.
Oh no.
Yeah, so she went to live with my uncle, so we still see her. Yeah. But yeah.
Do you have to take antihistamines?
Yeah.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to take them every day, which I don't anymore because we don't have any animals in the house. But yeah, but it's interesting because I don't feel it affects my skin, and I have dust allergies, which does affect it.
Yeah, same.
Dust is like the biggest. And then the issue is that whenever I have a flare, I try and make note of what has happened before to see what has tried to trigger it. But I've never really found anything
There's no clear
decisive.
pattern.
No. Stress is...
Yeah.
But with stress, I think it's more that when I'm stressed for a like reasonably long period of time, I like my management of my skin is worse. So like I don't put in as much effort into like doing my emollients as much as I should and stuff like that, and that then makes it worse. Yeah, rather than the actual stress itself.
That's a really I had forgotten that was something that, because you're so focused on doing other things. And you're like, because also if you to maintain it realistically, you need to moisturize. I think I was told by a doctor I need to moisturize like 7 times a day.
Yeah.
And that's almost impossible to do.
That's so impractical.
It's not going to happen, is it? Like, unless you're going to disappear to the toilet every 10 minutes.
And especially in a country where a lot of the year we have quite bad weather.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of layers to take off, isn't it?
Yeah. So
have you ever achieved that?
No, never managed to do that. I think your face, obviously, you can moisturize almost as much as you want, but the rest of your body, I mean, that would be something I do in the morning and something before I go to bed, and after a shower or something similar like that.
Yeah, we've talked about how children at school talked about your eczema. What about now as adults? I mean, adults can be a little bit blunt as well. And do you mind if people ask about it?
I've not really had any comments for like a number of years. I've been fortunate as well that my best friends have been my best friends since I was at primary school. And so they really only ever known me like this. And then when I came to London, my skin was pretty clear. So actually most of the people I speak with now are unaware of how bad it used to be. The only comments that I've had have been quite recent, where a few people assumed that because my skin, when it was bad, that was from poor diet, which I found really annoying. So I was like, you literally don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I had that last year. I had like a bad rash on my face, and I was working at a bar in London, and I had, in the space of like 2 weeks, I had 3 different customers talk to me about it, and not in a sort of like, oh, your skin, oh, I have eczema, or poor you, or stuff like that. It was, they were telling me that my gut health was wrong, and that I should completely cut out. One of them was like, don't eat anything for 24 hours and then clean your gut out, and then everything will be fine.
I've had that.
And there were no other customers, and I just had to keep nodding and continuing the conversation, when really I just wanted to be like, you don't know my skin. You don't know what I've gone through. And it was just like, ugh, it annoys me so much.
And I know they are trying to help, but I tried to catch myself a few times because people which is nice of them. A lot of the time, people will suggest, they'll see something on TV or something, and they suggest, "Oh, why don't you try this cream?" Yeah. And like I tend to get a bit. My jerk reaction is to be like, I honestly, I know you're trying to help, but like I've spent many years trying lots of different things. I now sort of have an understanding, but at the same time, being like they're not doing it to annoy you. But when people say things about diet, or they make an assumption around the lifestyle choice,
a bit judgmental, basically.
Yeah, and you're just like,
Thank you for your comment. Duly noted.
I'll give that a go next time.
Do you have a response? I mean, maybe other people listening to the podcast, they might comment and give their responses. But something that you can say to people like, "Oh, thank you for your concern. I have a condition. I'm looking after it," or
I tend
or just
to
go away if you're very tired.
If I could, I would just say go away, probably. But most of the time, that's not acceptable. So, but most of the time, I do just say, it's just eczema, but they keep going on and on about this thing because they think that's what they believe. Like, fair play to them. It's just.
And you said sometimes people have seen things themselves on TV or on social media and things. I mean, I assume you two must be seeing things on social media about eczema as well, because those algorithms, they seem to know what we're searching.
They really do.
Are you seeing those things? Has that ever been helpful, confusing, not helpful?
There's like a vast number of different routes that they take. I think I've seen some that are really helpful, and like they're spreading awareness about it and how difficult it can be. And every time I see that, I'm like, good, that's great, I love that. But then you do see those ones that are like giving you like these are the top tips to naturally cure your eczema. And I'm like, are they though?
Yeah.
Like, drinking this tea is not going to really help my lifestyle that much.
And is it maybe people trying to sell a product? Or...
A lot of the time, yeah.
Most of the time, I think.
Yeah.
The thing is, you two are both in your 20s. You know, been through university and you've got sort of a bit of sort of reasoning capacity to be able to see that. But if you were, 11 or something now, so many kids do have smartphones.
Yeah, I mean, that must be very difficult. I to be honest, I don't pay any attention to anything online unless it's from like a trusted source. But just be careful of like, there's always some miracle cream that's coming out that supposedly is going to basically cure you of your skin, and I would always be wary of those sorts of products because I've never come across one personally.
That works. Yeah, definitely. It's quite scary when I think about the kids now, because like I was probably of the last generation to like, I didn't have my phone until I was like well, still I was like 11 or 12. So but if you're looking up stuff and it's telling you this is what you need to do and you'll be completely fine,
and it can give false hope, which I think could be very detrimental to people's kind of mental and emotional well-being.
It's like it's quite horrible, but there's nothing you can really do.
It's difficult to navigate. I think that's the really, and because there's so much different information, if you're still early on and trying to work out what works best for you, there's just, I think, information overload, and you could get lost trying to find or trying lots of different things that really don't make much of a difference. But at the same time, I think it's not necessarily a bad thing to try out lots of different types of treatment, which, as long as they're not harmful to you, and working out what works best for you. So because it's different strokes for different folks.
I mean, one aspect of being an adult that we haven't touched upon, and I don't want to get too personal with either of you, but it's about relationships and boyfriends and girlfriends. And, how does eczema come into that? It's maybe a complication from time to time when you're sort of having to dash off to do your emollients, or if it disturbs your sleep and things.
For me, it was fine. I was in a long-term relationship prior to university. And so I was self-conscious. I don't really think she really cared that much. And then I came out of that just before I went to university. And that was the first time I started dating as a young adult. And I found it really difficult. It was also coincided with my skin being really bad. So I was just, unbelievably self-conscious, of how I looked. Not to get too personal, but the first time if you're with somebody, you're covered in eczema, you're like, this is just not how I want to be viewed. So that for me was very tricky to navigate.
Yeah, similar for me. It's just you're so self-aware of yourself and self-conscious that I just a lot of the time don't even go into the dating situation because it's just too much. And
really?
The times
you
I
actually
do
avoid it?
Yeah, sometimes when it's bad I do.
Yeah.
And then I have dated and done stuff and it's just like sometimes when the people you have to tell the people as well, and you're going through all of that every time, just being aware.
And also it's quite a personal thing to go into on a first meeting with someone.
Hi, I have eczema. What's your name?
It's not really how you want to start a date, is it?
Well, you don't want it to define you.
No,
because
exactly.
You're people with whole personalities and lives.
That is a big thing. You don't want it to define you, but you have to make it people aware as well. So it's balancing those two things. And
bringing somebody, if you bring somebody back to your room, and it's I try and keep it clean, my bedside tables, but they always have loads of different moisturizers. So you've got creams everywhere, you've got steroid creams everywhere, and you're just trying to know
go away.
Perhaps the romantic ambiance that you might want to go for.
Not the candles and which is not ideal.
But it's your life, and the right person will understand that.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a very loving and understanding girlfriend now, so it's okay. But I mean, it definitely really impacted me through the dating period. I found it very difficult.
Well, and having somebody that you feel you can open up to and be vulnerable with, it's so important, isn't it? Again, for your mental health.
Yeah, it's great for that, being able to talk to someone about it every day. It's just something that people need, really, isn't it?
And this is why we need the National Eczema Society and this podcast.
Yes.
And all of the awareness.
Precisely.
The more people know about it, the easier it is to deal with those curious questions. I mean, just is it okay for you in your day-to-day life if somebody wants to ask about your eczema now? Does it make you feel anxious? Does it make you feel worse?
If it's anyone that I've already opened up to, I love it. I think it's great because I think that they actually care and they want to know how it's going and how I'm feeling about it. I do struggle if it's just a random stranger talking to me about it.
Or telling you about your diet.
Yes. Telling me what I should be doing. Yeah. I would not recommend anyone to do that.
So you welcome curiosity.
Yes. But do it in a respectful way.
Yeah, I mean, I would say exactly the same. I'm more than happy to talk to people about it. And particularly, actually, if other people have got a form of eczema, it might be less severe or it might be more severe or whatever, and just having an open discussion about it, I think is really helpful. Agreed. When people are just telling you what you're doing wrong, that's maybe not the most helpful thing to be doing.
We'll put a call out for people to avoid doing that in future if possible. Put it politely. So we started off. Both of you're in quite a good place with your eczema right now. You are still using certain treatments and emollients. Other than having just a cure for eczema, if there was one thing that you could wish for regarding eczema, what would that be?
I think it's quite sad, but I think it would be for my teenage years back.
Oh.
Because I think it's quite I didn't really get the teenage experience that you'd want to have. And it's a sad thing, but yeah, I think just things like going out to parties and stuff rather than sitting at home worrying about your skin and putting your creams on and just stuff like that. Yeah, I didn't really get to do normal teenage activities.
Mine probably wasn't quite as severe in terms of not going out, but it definitely limited me to. I missed out on quite a few social events. So if I could change one thing, I don't know. Yeah, maybe similar to have had less of an impact on your formative years.
Yeah, definitely.
And I have to say, with both of you sitting in front of me right now, you seem like such confident, outgoing people. You'd never met before today, and here you are chatting away, chatting with our listeners. So, despite everything, you've really got so much resilience, and you're wanting to go out there and do all the things you want to do. So, that's all very hopeful. What advice might you give to somebody who is really struggling with their eczema at this point?
I think the main thing is that it does get better. When you're in the depths of a flare, it feels like this is life and this is it forever. But you always have to remember that it does get better and you will find something that works. Yeah. And of course it will come back at some points, come and go. But you've just got to focus on trying to live as much as you can, because otherwise you're just letting it win. Yeah. And that's what I try and do most of the time. Yeah, I would agree completely. Not let it define you. Yeah. It does get easier the bit older you get. It might not necessarily be easier or become less severe, but you become better at managing it, I think. And I've learned to not be as self-conscious. I mean, when you're a teenager, you're hyper self-conscious anyway. So that is one thing. But once you get a bit older, I think it does become a little less difficult to deal with. Lovely. A message of hope for anyone out there who's listening to this and, feeling like, is it ever going to get better? Chloe and Jack say it will. Hang on in there. Well, thank you both so much for sharing your eczema journeys with us. It's very generous of you to share all of that. Thanks to you as well for listening to or watching this podcast. We'd love for you to follow and subscribe to the series and to rate and review it if you have the time. For lots more information, please visit the National Eczema Society website at eczema.org. That's ECZEMA.org. If you have any questions, you can also contact info@eczema.org. And you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook and X, formerly known as Twitter, or follow our campaign on #MoreThanJustAnItch. Our next episode takes us into the world of parenting a child with severe eczema. We'll meet Katie and Sanjay and their son Sachin. It's a heartwarming story that covers the many challenges they've faced physically and emotionally. I'm Catherine Nicholson, and until that next episode, goodbye.